Okay, so I'll get going with my talk straight away. Shared eye movements made in response to dance. I'm going to preface this talk with a quote from Judith Hanna in her book on To Dance is Human. And its cultural patterning contributes to the selection of those mechanisms that transform affect and cognition into meaningful patterns of body movement, which arrest attention both because they are intentional and extraordinary. So there's something special about dance. That's the idea of this quote. That dance attracts our gaze, attracts our attention, and focuses our attention in very special ways because it's a particular type of human movement. And that's really what this study is all about. And eye movements are particularly good if you want to study guided attention. And so that's the core methodology that we're using in this study. We know from previous research that moving images are highly predictive when you're viewing images on a screen, are highly predictive of where people are going to make their fixations and pass from one fixation via the saccade to the next fixation. So the idea here is that we all have visual schema which influence where we look, but the object itself and the way in which it is moving, whether it's static, influences those schemas. So it's like a two-way negotiation that's constantly going on. This becomes even more extreme, though. This influence of the moving image becomes more extreme in film. And obviously directors and editors are well aware of this, and they cut their films accordingly. So even when the narrative context of a movie is changed, this is a famous study from Loschke and et al. In 2015, where they played various clips of Bond movies, some of which had the preceding narrative context, some of which didn't. And the alarming thing is that the director's cut is so skillful, so powerful at guiding our attention that irrespective of whether the narrative is there or not, we're all basically synchronized in terms of where we place our fixations, where we guide our attention in the movie. So the question then obviously the movie is exerting a huge amount of influence. We're bringing something to the table, but really the movie is dictating what's happening. So the question really is whether dance is being this extraordinary type of human movement, or is also exerting a very heavy influence. And if it is, we would expect to see highly synchronized patterns of fixations and saccades in observers when they are observing and watching dances. So that's the premise of the study. And when you study dance, there's sort of two ways you can go about it. You can do what people like Petri Toivonen and Jeff Luck have done, and that is allow people to engage in free dance, and then you use things like principal component analysis to pull out various salient movement features and then use those in an analysis. Or you can build your dancers up sort of from the bottom up. And if you do that, you can factorize dance very neatly, and that makes it susceptible to much more traditional statistical methods like analysis of variance, which is what we did. So how do you factorize dance? Well, we've been fortunate to work with dancers and with choreographers to actually ask them what is important when they are thinking about their own bodies, when they're thinking about dancers' bodies and how they move. Well, first of all, probably the most important factor is the body part. You've got the legs, you've got the arms, obviously, and you've got the full body. So you can think about just parsing the body into these different groups. Then you've got the locus of the gesture, and this is very important for dancers, whether the gesture is medial to the body, whether it's in line with the body, so the hand might be moving in this way, or whether it becomes a soloistic element and it starts to engage in peripheral movement. So you've got the body area, then you've got whether that particular limb is engaging in medial or peripheral movement. And then lastly, you've got the type of gesture. This is obviously something of simplification because you can have blends of all of these different things in a choreography. You can have gestures which are legato, smooth, and you can have them which have a high degree of acceleration, which engage in staccato movement. So we can put these factors and the different levels within the factors into a table. Here we've got the body part with the 3 levels, legs, arms and full. We've got the locus, this can engage in peripheral or medium movement. We've got the type, which is staccato, legato. And then once you've got that, then you can actually start to think about gestures and dance gestures, which capture these different factors and the different combinations of these factors. So you can already see an ANOVA table basically emerging, or a data frame emerging that could be put into an analysis. So for example, something like the overhead wave, and this is the only demonstration of the presentation, the overhead wave gesture, which is not particularly sophisticated as it happens at British football matches, but there you go, is a legato gesture, so it's quite smooth. It involves peripheral movement, so the hands are out there rather than close into the solar plexus. And obviously it involves the arms, and so on and so forth. You can have a look at those various types of gestures. Okay, so in our study, the dancers, we had 2 dancers, and they were recorded using high-definition video camera, and we used that video recording to put into the eye tracking lab. And then we're going to have participants further down the line who look at these videos and make their eye movement responses. At the same time as the video is happening, we have a passive marker motion capture system, which enables us then to associate the eye tracking data, which we collect from people watching the video, with the dancer's dynamic limb positions, locations. So you can bring those 2 things together. You can bring together eye tracking information, you can bring together the ballistic information, and then you can use one to predict the other. The dependent variable being the eye information and the independent variables being the movement data. So this is a video of just one of the dancers. It's a combination of all of these different gestures, and you'll see up in the top right-hand corner of the video the name of the gesture and the different factors or levels within each of the factors, whether it involves the arms, whether it involves the full body, whether it's a peripheral gesture, whether it's a staccato gesture, so on and so forth, that are being expressed in any one given gesture. We've also overlaid some of in this video we've overlaid some of the mocap information as well, so you can see how these 2 things can be brought together in a study. And but just to keep in mind that it was just the videos, not the mocap skeletons or passive markers as they move around the screen that was presented to the participants in the eye tracking part of the study. It was just the videos. Okay. Okay. So just to make sure that these factors are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, you can look at things like the cumulative distance of the legs, of the arms, for the different gestures. So you can take the cumulative distance, for example, of the right thumb marker and of the right foot marker. And for the leg gestures, you can see that here we've got the right foot, the foot marker is in the dark and the thumb marker is in the light. For a leg gesture, you can see that the right foot marker is moving more than the thumb marker. So that's good, that's what we wanted. For the arm gestures, well, basically we've got no movement in the legs at all, and we've got lots of movement in the right thumb. That's excellent. And for the full body, we've got lots of stuff going on in both. So that's good. Body seems to be being looked after by the different gestures that we've got. For locus, remember locus is peripheral versus medial movement. So we can, what we can do is we can check the distance, the cumulative distance, or the mean distance in this instance, from something like the right thumb marker to the solar plexus marker. And for peripheral gestures, we've got a relatively high amount of mean distance when compared to medial gestures. And that's what you would expect. You'd expect that the mean distance of this marker over here for the peripheral gestures is going to be very much more than for the medial gestures. And finally, you can have, for type, which is staccato or legato movement, you can have a look at things like maximum acceleration, which for the staccato gestures of the right thumb, for example, is much, much higher than it is for in the staccato gestures than it is in the legato gestures. Alongside those body factors, and locus and type, we also had another factor, which was the gaze direction of the dancer themselves. We know from previous literature, obviously, that gaze direction is particularly important with respect to whether that gaze is met by the observer or whether they are distracted by the presenter looking at something else. So we have the dancer looking directly at the camera, i.e. directly engaging the eyes of the observer when the video is shown in the eye tracking lab. We have the dancer looking at themselves and guiding their attention to certain parts of their body, whichever part of the body is moving. And then we also have the third condition, which is the dancer looking off to one side constantly. So they're doing the dance, but they're looking off to one side. So we wanted to see what effect the direction of the gaze direction of the dancer had on the attention and the fixations, therefore, of the observers. Alongside that, we also have two dancers. We have also gesture order. I'm not going to talk about the effects of the two dancers. Obviously, we hope that there's relatively little effect of dancer. I'll just give a bit of a spoiler. There was a slight effect of dancer in some of the measures. So, it's how we observe one dancer versus another dancer. So there's just a degree of idiosyncrasy there, but there's also a huge amount of commonality. Okay, so here's some of the questions. Was there a relationship between attention, eye fixation positions, and gesture locus? Remember, locus is whether it's peripheral or medial movement. And also, was there a relationship between attention, fixation positions, and gesture type, staccato versus legato? Which body part, hands or feet, produced greater attention? Which gaze condition produced more head-directed attention? That's gaze of the dancer, whether they were looking directly forwards, whether they were observing themselves, or whether they were looking off to one side. And also, which gaze condition of the dancer produced the most synchronized attention? And we analyze that looking at the standard deviations in various time windows of the fixations. Sort of scattering analysis, scatter plot analysis, if you like. Okay, so first of all, to the gesture locus and guided attention. So here we have our dancer, a schema of a dancer. Remember that the locus is made from medial and peripheral gestures. And first of all, what we want to ask is, what's the average fixation distance to the hands across locus? So when the dancer is making a medial gesture versus a peripheral gesture, do the fixations cluster more closely to are they more closely associated with the hand when it makes a medial gesture versus whether it's out here? Remember, when it's out here, it's sort of doing a solo thing. So we sort of hypothesized that fixations would get closer to a limb the further away it got from a body because it's doing this soloistic thing. But we didn't actually find that. What we find that this is average distance from the hand. For the medial gestures, the fixations are actually closer than the peripheral ones. We were a bit puzzled by that. We thought this would attract attention. But there's a well-known phenomenon in eye tracking and screen research whenever your eye tracking involves observing images on screen, and that's called central screen bias. Now, our dancer was always in the middle of the screen, and basically what this stipulates is that whenever we're watching a screen, we tend to look at the middle. Even if the target moves off to the left, the center of the screen exerts this bias. It pulls our eyes back to the middle of the screen. So if we've got sort of a peripheral movement over here, and the center of the screen is here, this is going to exert a bias. So we have to rethink this question. And the way we rethought this question was by asking what's the average fixation distance to the solar plexus across locus. Remember, locus is this peripheral versus medial, and the idea is that we've got a distance from the solar plexus around about here, and when we make a peripheral gesture, if this peripheral gesture is exerting an influence and attracting fixations, the fixations associated with peripheral gestures should be further away from the solar plexus than for medial gestures. So that's the idea behind this, and this is precisely what we find. So when you have a peripheral gesture, it's definitely attracting attention away from the center of the body and from the center of the screen, despite that bias which the center of the screen is exerting. Okay, so on to gesture type. We've done locus, on to type. Remember, we've got two types of gestures. We've got the legato gestures and we've got staccato gestures. That's the staccato gesture, but not a thunderbolt. But looks a bit like it, doesn't it? Okay, and we're asking what's the average fixation distance to the hands across type, across whether it's legato gestures or staccato gestures. And legato gestures, irrespective of whether it's medial or peripheral, the fixations are much closer to the legato gestures than whether it's staccato gestures. And we think this is to do with accuracy. When you have something which is moving slowly, the eyes can track that much more accurately. When something's moving quickly, there's a sort of latency involved, the hand has moved on to a different position, so on and so forth. So that's definitely a very strong finding for that. We can also ask the question whether the average fixation distance to the solar plexus is different for staccato gestures versus legato gestures. And for that, we didn't find an effect at all. So it doesn't matter whether it's legato gesture or staccato gesture. When it's the distance of the fixations from the middle of the body from the solar plexus is not statistically different. There was, however, an interesting interaction between locus and type, which can be seen here. So what we've got in the dotted line is the legato gesture, and basically what it means, this interaction means, is that this interaction is being really driven by the variance in the legato gestures. This is the average distance from the solar plexus, and you can see that when the legato gesture moves away, the eyes are really moving and following it all the way. It's following it out there, getting distance from the solar plexus and then coming back in. Whereas for staccato gestures, they just remain constant. And so staccato gestures, irrespective of whether they're made in the periphery or in the center of the body, are being observed either through direct foveation, that's you foveate on something, you're fixating on something, or in the parafoveal region. So it's really being driven, this interaction is being driven a lot by the variance in the legato gestures. Okay, on to body part and directed attention. There's quite a lot of information on this graph, but there's a very simple take-home message, and that is that we've got body arms moving, the body part moving from arms through to body through to legs, and then we've got distance from the hands, which is the light red, and then average fixation distance from the feet markers in the dark red. And as we move from arms through to body, through to legs, you can see that the fixations get successively further away from the hands, which is sort of what you expect. And the inverse is also true. So as you move from arms, body, legs gestures, the fixations move significantly closer to the feet. But the important take-home message is really this coupling over here. And that's when, even when you have leg gestures, the fixations are significantly closer to the hands than they are to the feet. So the hands really are incredibly important with respect to our attention and our focus when dancers are making gestures, and irrespective of whether that gesture involves just the feet or the body or the hands themselves. So that's the take-home message from that. A little bit now just to finish up on the gaze direction of the dancer. So here we're asking, does the gaze direction of the dancer affect the extent to which we stare back towards the head? So this is the forward, this is the average distance of fixations from the head marker. This is when the dancer is gazing forward. That's when they're gazing at themselves and following their actions, and that's off to the side. So you can see that there's a significant attention is placed on the head of the dancer when the dancer's gaze is directly forward at the camera. And then lastly, what about this issue of synchronization and gaze? Does the gaze direction of the dancer mean that, or affect the degree to which if you have a whole group of participants watching, they tend to watch in the same place more than over one gaze condition versus another? So to do this, we have a moving window. This is a schematic representation of lots of fixations. We have a gesture at a particular moment in time, and then for a given length of time after that gesture is made, we harvest all the fixation position information. We take standard deviation from that. What we do is we slide this through the fixation data, harvesting all of those standard deviations, which means that we can do the stats. Okay, and to finish up, let's just have a look at the result, which was the standard deviations in the Y dimension, that's up and down, versus those in the horizontal dimension. And the important thing to look out for here is that when the dancer is looking off to the side, the amount of diffusion in the fixations is significantly greater. And the real take-home message from that is, if you want to maintain the attention of an audience, you have to look them in the eye as much as possible. Eye contact is crucially important, probably not just for dancers, but definitely for dancers. Okay, so just to summarize, we've got peripheral gestures attract attention, so locus matters. Legato gestures attract attention, so type of gesture matters. Hand over body over feet produces greater attention, so the body part matters. And looking away to the side lowers synchronized attention. And thank you very much indeed.